Good morning, everyone. It's Dr. Carol Lourie, and I'm here with a really dear friend and colleague, Mindy Gorman-Plutzer, who is a functional coach. I'm not getting it right, Mindy. And she's going to further introduce herself. I have short-term memory problems. I apologize, but Mindy is an expert in her field, and we're going to have a really informative conversation. So thank you so much for being here, Mindy. And why don't you start by fixing my mess up of an introduction? I apologize.
Oh, no. I'm thrilled to be here, Carol. I really am. And first of all, I am here to be of service to women who are struggling with eating challenges. My background is as a board certified health coach. I have additional certifications in eating psychology coaching and functional medicine nutrition. And I came to this work as a result of my own disordered behavior with and beliefs about food and my body. And through my training, I developed this, what I like to think of as a new and empowering approach that can bring about lasting and sustainable healing.
Just so beautiful. I've never heard about eating psychology before. Would you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, this is what really excites me. To simplify it, we take a deep dive into who you are as an eater. When we look at how we eat, why we eat, that's really a biggie. When we eat, the what has an interesting way of taking care of itself, because learning about who we are as eaters allows us to connect to the very brilliant wisdom of our bodies, which so many of us women are disconnected from. So connecting to the wisdom of our bodies allows us to look at signs and symptoms as messages that our body is sending us, and we can address them appropriately.
Well, I think that's very interesting, because my experience has been that we get layers on us with the standard American diet, and we lose that connection, that ability to distinguish or differentiate what we really need and what we really want versus what society says. Oh, grab this, do that. You know, you're on your way to work, grab some coffee and a muffin. Just the worst way to start the day.
Yes, it is. But what every one of us needs to understand is that we are each unique with a very unique physiology. I mean, there's a lot of talk and publicity out there now about our gut microbiome. Well, our gut microbiome is as unique as our fingerprint. And what we eat, how we eat it, how we style our lives has a huge impact on that environment within. And particularly what we go through in our lives, you know, and as a midlife woman who has been through a lot of life experience, I can say that how we think, how we live, what we experience does take its toll on our biology, on our physiology, which impacts our psychology. And that's where we need to allow ourselves to take on a very unique approach to our healing. The other piece of that is how we source our self-worth. Now, as women, right, we are nurturers. We can source our self-worth from how we think we need to look, the image we put out to the world. We can source our self-worth by how powerful and materialistically successful we are. And that needs to be looked at too, because that has an impact on how we treat ourselves. And what that comes really down to, Carol, is our relationship to self is reflected in our relationship to everything else. Our relationship to food and our bodies is part of that reflection.
This is so deep and so wonderful. And, you know, I've had many conversations with women and professionals who specialize in food and eating, but nothing at this level that's connecting the inner and the outer. So thank you so much for bringing that to the forefront, because in the work that I do, I think it's all about that inner and outer connection. It comes from within, and then everything sort of flows if you're connected. So how do women start this process if they feel like they're eating standing up, or they're grabbing stuff and eating in the car, or they serve everybody? I had one woman, this is a true story, she had 4 children at once, and she came in and she was massively overweight. And I said, and there were 4 at this point, I said, so how do you eat? She said, oh, I feed the kids, and then as I'm cleaning up, I eat the leftovers. I went, oh my God. Yeah. I said, so are you the garbage can? Because that's how you're treating yourself. And it was like, oh. So that was the beginning of her realizing. And I said, so do kids have boundaries? Like they eat, and then when you eat, do they bother you? Oh yeah, I don't get to eat. I said, okay, so this is a behavioral problem. I said, they're not infants, they're 4. Mommy's eating, you know, you're going to have to wait. So it was a whole, you're right, it came from her opinion of herself and her self-worth. And we had to institute that before we could even begin to get her to change over to feed her kids healthier. And then she was, you know, as soon as I said, oh, are you the garbage can? That was a big wake up call for her, because she had never thought of herself like that. And there are women who do that.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, that speaks to how disconnected we are from ourselves, our needs, our desires. And that, Carol, goes back to story. You know, the stories that we are attached to, the messages that we received about ourselves that become our story, then that story and our attachment to it morphs into a belief system. And then we learn to either numb, distract, or avoid feelings that get in the way, or we fear to be so uncomfortable that we want to protect ourselves from them. So the story part of this work is really important, and that's where we need to start. You know, my work with women encompasses context. It's so important to look at the context within which the behaviors evolved. And again, that looks different for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Can you give an example of some context in which behaviors would happen?
Of course. I could speak to my own context, which I'm very happy to do. You know, I was raised in a very loving family, but it was complicated. I grew up with, I was the first of 3 daughters. And when my youngest sister was born, she was very shortly diagnosed with a genetic condition that was not going to give her a long and healthy life. And this dark cloud settled over our family very quickly. Mm-hmm. And I learned to be quiet, to stay out of the way, to be extremely obedient, not to question, and not to ask for much. And that morphed into my later years of me never really having the confidence to ask for what I needed. But at the same time, I was receiving a message about image. It was important how I looked. It was important about what I projected to the world. And at the same time, my parents were dealing with their own weight issues. So collectively, every Monday, we went on a diet as a family. And I'm going back to the 60s, right? So
every Monday, we went on a family diet.
Every Monday. So it was Atkins, it was Stillman's, it was Weight Watchers.
Weight Watchers.
Right. And then, of course, there was calorie restriction. And being the obedient, good little girl I was, I took it to the extreme. And that carried me through my 20s and 30s and into my early 40s. And every time I thought I got a handle on it, life got in the way. And for me, when I was in my late 40s, my husband was diagnosed with metastatic melanoma. And after a fierce 21-month-long battle, we lost him. I was 49. Thank you. I was 49 years old, and I was completely lost. But my mind remembered the self-soothing techniques that I learned as an early dieter, right? Eat, not eat, feel better. And
when you do blow it, then you dump on yourself for days and hours. Oh my God. I mean, I'm a horrible person.
So for me, the context was image and self-soothing. I've worked with women who have a very disordered, dysfunctional relationship with the concept of deprivation. And after years of giving of themselves to their family, maybe a career, or maybe giving up a career in an effort to raise a family, now they are empty nesters. They feel it's their time, but their definition of self-soothing is self-indulgence. And here they're finding themselves with extra weight on their bodies, maybe some chronic illness that's ensued as a result of or contributing factor to. And they need to really dig deep and look at their relationship to self, which is reflected in their relationship to deprivation. Then there are the messages that we got as children. Simple. Finish everything on your plate.
Oh, we have the starving children in China syndrome.
Yeah, starving
children in China. Finish everything on your plate.
Right. Or look how hard your mother worked to prepare this meal. Do you know how hard your father works to provide for this meal?
With the food. And when we had our daughter, and my mother, who was her granny, I said to her, Mom, we are not doing the starving children in China syndrome. We are not doing the take one more bite. The statement is, are you done? Are you full? Period.
Yeah. Right. Because what that messaging does is it instills in us the fact that we are not capable of trusting our bodies.
Right.
So imagine how that can morph over the years. Right. So those are just very simple, very superficial examples of context. But again, everybody's story is unique, and the work, everybody's different. And so very often what I do when I work with somebody is have them write an autobiography of their relationship with food and their bodies. Go as far back as they can remember, maybe do it in decades. And that allows us to look at it together in partnership and go back and actually root out and reframe the messaging so that it can be let go of, reframed, to create that internal shift that is so important to mindset. So you see, it's not as important in these early stages to look at what you're eating. It's important to look at how and why you're eating.
So that has to come first, 100%.
Yeah. Story.
I love that story. And people tend to dismiss story. They think it's not that important, or, oh, it doesn't really matter. It happens to everybody. Let's just put me on a diet and fix the problem. And, that old phrase, diets don't work, is so true.
Oh, yes. Diets don't work. Diets, relying on a scale, relying on anything outside of yourself
100%.
For a solution is not going to be sustainable. It might work in the short term, but it's not going to give you the lasting and doable and sustainable results that we all deserve.
I can't even begin to tell you how much I agree with that, because in my Empowered Against Recurrence program, the first week is notice this phrase, nurturing nutrition that supports your good health. And women come in in all perspectives. Now we're dealing with cancer, breast cancer, it's the same thing. And I ask them to keep a food log for a few days before they have their appointments, the session, and then we all share in a group. And I'd say 80% of women think eating oatmeal is a good way to start the day. Which for cancer, first of all, it's a processed food. Even if it's steel cut oats, it's gluten, and then it's a carbohydrate, and that's sort of like gas for the cancer gas tank. They love carbs and sugar. So we have to start, and then a lot of women in the community use the phrase diet, and I go, no, it's the anti-cancer diet. It's not anti-cancer anything. It's pro new way of looking at your life and nurturing yourself with food. And the women, as you said, I think they need to embody that inside themselves, because if they think, oh, Carol says I can't eat this or I shouldn't eat that, that's not going to sustain them for the long run. right?
That's so very true. And I like to think of the nutritional recommendations we make as therapeutic protocols. You know, in the functional medicine world, the topic of elimination diet comes up a lot. Now, with the women I work with who have eating challenges, that could be a trigger in either way, right? So for the woman who is a chronic restrictor, she's going to love the idea of an elimination diet. For a woman who has that dysfunctional relationship with deprivation, it's going to be a trigger for that way of thinking, and it's going to drive her to overeat and binge. So what I like to talk about with my clients is, let's embrace a therapeutic protocol. Let's look at what's going on within you, what your body is doing with the food you're eating. That's the philosophy behind functional medicine nutrition. It's not what you eat, it's what your body is doing with what you're eating. And again, that's going to look different for everybody. And we create a personalized nutrition plan when my client is ready to embrace that. And what I teach is that self-indulgence in an effort not to feel deprived is only depriving you from being the best version of yourself.
It's beautiful, beautifully said.
But going back to this therapeutic protocol idea for your community, it's very important to understand, again, what your body is doing with the food you're eating. And it's also important to understand that saying no to a food that doesn't serve you is not restricting. It's making an empowered choice.
Exactly.
Again, there's the reframe. There's the reframe. There's that internal shift. And that is what can lead to freedom, food freedom, freedom from fearing what food will do to you. And you can start embracing what it can do for you.
That is the crux of how, when I have one of the women in my group, she's a teacher. And I don't know, for those of you who are familiar, you go into the teacher's lounge, and over on the right, there's this table that the parents, especially at the end of the year, the parents are bringing cookies and thank you, cupcakes, and it's somebody's birthday, and there's candy. And this woman said to me, and she's overweight, and she said, I don't even know how to begin to not do that. And we had a long conversation. I don't know if I helped her as much as you could, but it really has to do with understanding that it's not about not doing that table. It's about, we have to find, and I phrase it, and you might want to correct me if it's not the right perspective, but there has to be an internal connection so that you can turn that switch off, so that that food no longer pulls you. And it's not about somebody saying you can't do this. It's about you choosing to go for health as opposed to eating this food from that table. Now, that might not be the right perspective because you're obviously more expert about this than I am, and I appreciate your input.
Well, you know, Carol, it's not so much that it's not the right perspective. You're spot on, but the exploration has to go further back. You've got to connect the dots to why this food, particular food, these high-fat, sugar-laden foods have power over someone, right? Where is the reward in not letting go of the need for this food? I don't talk about resistance with my clients. I talk about how that behavior is serving them, because I am a firm believer in the fact that disordered eating behaviors, eating disorders, are not the problem. They started out as a solution to help us navigate a world we no longer felt safe in. Now, that could be as a result, and it's perfectly valid to be a result of a cancer diagnosis. You no longer feel safe in your body. You feel as though your body's betraying you. And you're navigating a step at a time in this new world with this new world view. And how do you feel safe? And this goes back, if I may, think about this. Our very first experience with feeling safe, with feeling nurtured, with feeling seen, had to do with being fed. Our very first experience as humans on this blessed earth was when we were fed. We had no sense of autonomy, no sense of self, The only thing we knew was we felt safe because of the person that was responsible for our care and feeding. Now, somewhere along the line, the message that was saved in the brain, eat, feel safe, is stored in the limbic part of the brain. Later on, life happens. Our brain remembers, need to feel safe, eat, feel better. So it goes way back to that. So to your woman, you know, why is it so difficult to say no and honor yourself when you have these food choices before you? Why is the food taking place and having such power over you? That's the question.
Yeah, okay.
It's not a simple answer, but believe, I'm not inferring at all that it's simple, but this is where the work has to be.
Yeah, and you have to say no from a place of empowerment. I love that word, empowerment. You used it. It's such an important word for me, as opposed to restriction, because restriction makes you feel pissed off and angry and resentful, and eventually you're going to go, oh, the heck with it, and you're going to just eat what you know that you really is not healthy for you, and you've chosen, you give in, so to speak,
and deprived, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the other piece too that causes compulsive overeating, and that's what I like to refer to as protective eating. You know, a woman, the professional dieter, who is basically restricting all day, making food choices that she deems proper. Very often it's not enough. She's not getting enough nutrients. She's nutrient deficient. And at the end of the day, she's tired, perhaps stressed. She's finally alone with thoughts that make her uncomfortable. And our bodies are going to make us eat when we are nutritionally insufficient. So that's another piece of it. So, and sometimes we overeat due to an emotionally charged situation. I know you wanted to talk about emotional eating.
Well, I'm happy to talk about anything. You have this.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So, you know, let's talk about emotional eating, because, you know, having a dire diagnosis, having a life event take over is certainly a trigger for many of us. So I like to break the concept of emotional eating down this way. First, there's eating in response to an emotionally charged situation. So that could be anger, frustration, sadness, loneliness, deprivation, frustration. In this instance, the person reaching for the food is pretty much aware of what she's doing. And very often she can stop when she realizes she's overdoing it and she's had enough. Then there is eating. Now, this is an important distinction. There's eating in an effort not to feel emotion.
Very different.
The scenario I just described can lead to this one, but this is where the person would end up in a food-induced haze, a binge, eating past the point of being full, not being able to stop, and very often wanting to get rid of it. Compensatory behaviors could be laxative abuse, could be vomiting, could be compulsive overexercising. But then there's the kind of emotional eating that I love to see. And that's when we bring our emotions to the table. We invite ourselves to the table as an honored guest, and we invite our senses to take part, and we experience being at that table and the bounty of what this food can do for us. And keep in mind, in this vein, even a person with the healthiest relationship with food will occasionally overindulge. Indulge in that extra piece of deliciousness for whatever reason, celebration, grandma's favorite recipe, a holiday tradition, whatever it might be. So that's when we bring emotion with us to the table. So
in a positive way.
Yes, yes, yes. So I don't want the topic of emotional eating to only mean negative behavior that we want to do away with.
I think that's so beautiful, bringing in the full picture. And what you described is creating beautiful food, coming to the table with yourself or community, looking at the abundance, looking at the health, and sitting down and enjoying the nurturance from the food as well as the company and the moment.
Yes, experiencing the feast that is your life.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Experiencing the feast that is your life.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. Inviting yourself to the table as an honored guest. And that could be metaphoric for the table of life.
It's a nice way of looking at every moment of your life. I'm an honored guest in my life. It shows from a deep-rooted sense of self-esteem and self-worth, don't you think?
No question. Again, it goes back to how we source our self-worth and our relationship to self that allows us to set healthy boundaries, that allows us to create the life that we want, the life that we so desire and deserve, right? That was our given birthright, you know, before we stopped feeling safe. So a really wonderful exercise for women who are navigating uncertainty, whether it be with their health or any other issue that comes up for them, would be to really practice and perhaps journal on where they do feel safe today. Where did I feel safe today? That could be your membership in this group, meeting with Carol, a conversation with a beloved friend. For some, it means going out and doing errands and feeling confident in your ability to do that. But by acknowledging that I am safe today, it helps you to be fully present and grounded and let go of the story that perhaps had been defining you and calling on you to rely on behaviors that are no longer serving you.
I think that's, you know, the name of this group is The Path to Breast Cancer, a Safe Place. That's, and in the online program, we create a safe place. And I think safety is non-judgmental, a component of it. And you're non-judgmental to yourself as well as to others. And when one of the things I encourage women to do is get in touch with their inner voice, which is nonstop for all of us. And, oh, I should have done this. Oh, I did that. And see how much judgment there is in yourself. Oh, I ate this too fast. I should have worn that. I made a right. I should have gone left. I mean, it's nonstop. And that then, when you can never really turn that off, but you can dramatically lower the volume once you become aware of it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up self-talk, because another little tip that I often suggest is, you know, we're talking about awareness, inviting in curiosity, and become curious, right? Is my self-talk bringing me closer to or further away from experiencing a change I want to see? You know, we're talking about eating disorder or disordered eating recovery. It's important to, first of all, look at the definition of recovery. Recovery is defined as regaining what was lost or taken. Now, when we are giving up our power to addictive behaviors, then we're basically losing a part of ourselves. So recovery means regaining what was lost or taken. But there's a difference between doing recovery and being recovered. And that's where the internal shift happens. That's about transformation. That's when you realize that transformation is less about what we do to change and more about what we let go of in an effort to become the change. And I say that quite often. So we can follow a food plan, follow an exercise plan, read bloggers, follow advice that we see online. But unless we embody the reason why we are seeking this transition, this transformation, and make that internal shift from where we were, why we were there, to where we want to be. It's very difficult to become empowered and have that sustainable result.
Absolutely. It's absolutely. And on some level, it's very simple, but on another level, it's so outside the box of what standard Western, psychology approach to problems messages. It's a whole different level of messaging.
Yeah. It's funny. When I hit my first bottom, I was in my late 30s. And it was a time in my life where I should have been experiencing the most wondrous growth. My girls were teenagers. They were growing into beautiful young women. And yet I was not the role model for them that I needed to be. And their relationship with food and their bodies was suffering. My relationship with my husband was starting to suffer because he was vacillating between worry and support for me and resentment towards me. So I went to see my family doctor, not knowing what to do. And he sent me to a therapist who I was seeing twice a week. And then together they sent me to a dietitian who had me following a meal plan that was, in my mind, and still to this day, knowing what I know now, absurd in the quantity and variety of food. And she told me to wash it down every night with 2 glasses of wine to keep me relaxed. Plus, they put me on antidepressants.
Antidepressants, of course. Let's just put you on antidepressants in 5 seconds.
And anti-anxiety drugs. So basically, I was being told what I needed to weigh, what I needed to think, and what I needed to eat. Nobody was asking or addressing what I was really hungry for.
What are you unhappy about?
Right. What was I hungry for? Where were the real cravings? Right. And I just knew this wasn't going to be sustainable. But the good little girl that I was, I showed up. That was doing recovery. It wasn't until years later that I lost my husband. And I realized at that point I had a choice, right? I could show up for my now adult daughters, who one was married, about to have a baby. I wanted to be a part of their lives. Truth be told, Carol, if we're really going to get down to it, there were times I felt that they must have felt that the wrong parent died.
Oh, that's
so
really
I knew.
Harsh.
I
knew
knew
harsh, honey.
So I had a choice. I could either stay buried in the darkness and stay the victim, or I could choose light. And remembering on the strength I drew upon years before doing recovery, I embraced the light. And at 52 years old, I enrolled in my health coaching certification course, followed by the eating psychology course, and then the functional medicine nutrition certification. And I was able to basically embrace my recovery, but I knew I needed to pay it forward. And that's how my practice, the Freedom Promise, was born. By discovering the steps that I was taking to help me stop fearing what food would do to me and allow me to embrace what it could do for me.
Mm-hmm. It's when I think about what I know now and where we've come now, and when you went to your male doctor and he gave you, oh, let's just give you antidepressants. Oh, you need some anxiety, and you have a couple glasses of wine. I mean, in my opinion, women should treat women. We're best with women. And this takes me back to the commercials on television where it's for an antidepressant, and the person who's depressed is always a woman. And, there's this one commercial where the house is a mess. What does that mean? There's dishes in the sink and the bed is not made, and there's piles of laundry. Now, when my girl was growing up, I had dishes in my sink, I had unmade beds, and I had piles of laundry. Did I need antidepressants? I don't think so. But I look at that commercial, it makes me so angry. It's like, why? First of all, why is it only the woman's job to keep the house, quote unquote, organized and neat? Second of all, what happened to the woman that she's not feeling well?
Yeah. why'd she get there in the first place?
Exactly. So I'm sorry that when I hear stories such as yours, it's like, as a feminist, it's like, it really is so upsetting that women have to go through that. You know, you go to the doctor with the white jacket. Now, I have a white jacket in my closet. Do I need to put it on for people to take me seriously? I want to be the opposite of that. You know, and when women show up for the oncology appointments, they're also, I'm going to be the good patient. I want to beat this. You know, these people are experts. And sometimes the stories I hear and the way that they're treated and what is recommended, it's like, oh my goodness, this is not really appropriate standard of care. And nobody should be talked to like that. So it's really about individuating your life and becoming connected to yourself and believing that there's a better path and a way forward, I think.
And not allowing yourself to be gaslit.
Right.
Because unfortunately, medicine in America today, in many cases, is about gaslighting us. But I choose to look at my experience as exponential growth.
Yeah. And
that's why I choose to be of service to women today, to help them find that empowerment, that power within themselves from that was there before they needed to rely on behaviors outside of themselves to feel safe.
So beautiful, Mindy. Thank you. So how do women reach you?
Thank you. Well, my website is thefreedompromise.com. There, people are welcome to email me, Mindy @thefreedompromise. You can find me on social media, less these days, but Instagram @thefreedompromise.
Ladies, I hope that you will really take to heart what Mindy has shared here, because it is the crux of everything.
Yeah, it is. And I certainly am not sitting here with the intention of inferring that this work is easy. It's not, but find support, right? Healing does not happen in a vacuum. No. And just make sure, and as I'm sure Carol offers, find yourself a partner who'll walk beside you on this journey, right? Not in front of you, not behind you, but beside you, so she can really meet you where you are.
Right. Support makes a huge difference between transformation and just staying stuck. And there isn't enough messaging in our society about support and the importance of it. And I think it's really critical. And especially with, I think as women, it's twofold. I think we've been given the messaging that we should be able to do it ourselves. So we have this difficulty asking for support. But then there's the message of, oh, I'm too busy, or I can do this myself, I'm fine. And both of those are, I'm sorry, distorted messagings for your health.
Yeah, well, a lot of it comes down to unlearning. Unlearning the messages that we carry with us that became our story. I just this morning came across a post, and I wrote it down for a client that I'm going to see this afternoon. It said, unlearning is the greatest form of humility. It's recognizing that everything and everyone is a teacher. And I love that, because we can look at all the things that happen to us in our lives. And when we get to this point in our lives, lots of things happened to us, with us, and for us. And if we look at everything as a teacher, we can find the blessing in it, because every day is a new opportunity to embrace new possibilities.
It's beautiful. Mindy, thank you so much. It's beautiful.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you so much. This was like one of my most favorite interviews yet.
Oh, you're very kind.
And I hope the women who watch this really benefit from it as much as I did. And we're just bringing the messaging to the world. And reach out, ladies.
It takes a village, Carol. It takes a village. Together we can make an impact.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to your
here.
work. Thank you.
Thank you. But ladies, bye for now. It's Carol Lourie. This was a really deep and wonderful interview, and there'll be more later. Have a lovely afternoon. Mindy, hang on here. We'll talk for a second.
Okay.